When you read great books, the authors and characters become dear friends. As we continue our series on literature, we are sharing some of our favorite authors and why great books are so important to a world-class education. You're listening to the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. This is a podcast to help you homeschool simply, inexpensively, and enjoyably. Carole Joy Seid has been helping families homeschool for several decades now through her literature-based approach to education. In this episode, Carole returns to her conversation with Jan Bloom, who shares advice for homeschool parents who want to raise readers. Listen in.
It's been fun to be part of people's lives and, to have people come up and tell us how they discovered this author or that author. And, things have really changed in homeschooling. So this new crop of homeschoolers, there's a group of them that still do the older books, but I don't know a lot about the newer books. And so that's a challenge when people come into the booth and ask about newer authors. And there's so many of them. And some are really great and some I think are not so great. Whereas the ones in my book, the first volume, when it was produced in like 2000 or 2001, I think all but 6 of the authors had died. So, these authors were older authors. And then volume 2, I just started keeping track of authors that people said, I can't believe you don't have this author in the book.
Right.
And so I started a list, and finally I thought, I have enough to do a second volume. So I think the second volume was 10 years later, maybe in 2009. And so they were a little bit more current than the first volume. But I still, they still mostly are what I would consider to be the older authors. Who wrote, in a time that was...
Of the innocence, a time of innocence for children.
It was. And a time of strong families and family members doing things together. Now it's mostly unrelated kids.
Play dates.
Being a group.
Complete strangers. Instead of loving your siblings and having... as a child, I was not read to. My mother was highly educated, but she really never read to me. And I just somehow I had a great first grade teacher and a great childhood librarian at my elementary school who also owned a camp. So that woman, that librarian, Miss Odell, never married. She loved books and she loved nature. So can you see how God in first grade imprinted me with the things that I care about? Why I'm sitting outside to do our interview, because I can't bear to be indoors when it's a beautiful day. So those people influenced me so much. But these old authors, I would read these stories, Jan, about these happy, sweet little families. And I wasn't really raised in a family of faith. And so I would read these innocent books and the children all loved each other and the dog was happy and whatever. It was everyone loved each other. There was joy, there was innocence. And I would cry when the book ended. And they weren't even necessarily great literature. They were just, even things like the Bobbsey twins, or I don't know if you've ever read Honey Bunch. Have you ever read that?
Yes. Honey Bunch and Norman.
Oh, okay. I don't know that one, but just Honey Bunch. We had a friend and they had these books and I think it was from, friends of my parents from their childhood. And I would borrow these books and I would cry as I read them because of the happiness in the books and the sweetness of relationships and the innocence. I think even in my childhood growing up in the 50s and 60s, there was already a loss of innocence in our books that was not in those old books. And I like to say I rarely read anything by anyone who's breathing. That's kind of a good rule of thumb because history is the ultimate sieve. And so all these books that are being written today, they're a dime a dozen, there's millions and billions of them. And I always say when publishers want me to read a book, I always say, so tell me, do you think this will be in print in 20 years? 20 years, that's nothing. And they all groan and kind of shrug and shift around on their feet because they know, in all honesty, this book won't even be in print in 20 years. So why would I read it when I haven't even had time to read Anna Karenina? So my motto is read books mostly old. And you won't go wrong, because we don't know if a book is going to stand the test of time. But if we read an old book, we know for sure if it stood the test of time, particularly if it's still in print. I mean, think of a book like Wind in the Willows, been in print about 150 years now, and they keep printing it. Why? Because people still love it and they're making money on it. They're not altruistic. They don't think, oh, well, this is a good book every child should read. They could care less about your children or your grandchild. But they want to know is, will the book sell? And Wind in the Willows is a continual bestseller, or the 4 hardback Winnie the Pooh books. Why are they still in print? Because they're fabulous. And graduate school students love them just as much as your 6-year-old will love them. And the humor is just as sophisticated now as it was then. And so reading old books and the service that you do by collecting these books and selling it to people who may not even know about them. Thank you for doing that.
Well, it's always an adventure. And I figured, someday I should sit down and just tally up the miles that we've put on our vehicles with all the conventions we've gone to. And
I know.
it's been good. Oh, so in the front of the turquoise book, there's a quote that a bookseller friend of mine, let me see if I can grab a book.
Okay, I've got one right here.
Where it says 80%. It's like the second page or something. 80% of all books
have been published since 1980. 80% of those would have been better off left as trees. That's a great quote. 80% of all books have been published since 1980, and 80% of those would have been better off left as trees. And you said somebody quoted it, Jerry Hansen, but I guess he's not the originator of the thought. But these are really, really important concepts because, again, older tends to be better. Older tends to be better. We can't there are new books being written every day that are great books. But how do we know if they're going to stand the test of time? We don't. But in 30 years, we'll know, or 50 years, or 100 years, we'll definitely know. So why not just read the old books now and save yourself a lot of sifting, is my motto.
Sifting, yes. So I do read modern Christian fiction.
Yeah.
I'm careful about the publishers. I go by publishers.
Yeah, me too.
And I do enjoy a lot of that, just because there wasn't a lot of that done. I really like Angela Elwell Hunt, who does, Bible characters.
Oh.
Or, there's just so many great authors. I love Bible character fiction stories.
Yes.
And so I do read some more modern books.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I'll still love you.
But
what about Jan Kieran?
I've really enjoyed her stuff, and at some point in time, I'd like to start at the beginning and go through.
I do it all the time. I read them over and over and over. They never disappoint me. Never.
But that was one thing I had to learn of rereading a book. Yeah. I had never reread a book.
Really?
And so that's been something maybe in the last 10 years.
Yes.
I've started rereading books because I never did before. Mm-hmm. And so that's really been a joy and a delight because you're through the conflict. You know what the conflict is.
Right.
So you can enjoy the dialogue and the character development and the writing. Yep.
You nailed it, Jan. That's why I read Jane over and over again. And she gets better every year, doesn't she? She's the gold standard.
She really is. She's so piercingly insightful.
Yeah, Jane Austen. She says, as Jerem Bars from the Francis Schaeffer Institute says, when you read Jane Austen, you think to yourself, I don't believe that could be any better put. Like, the woman was a wordsmith, and she's considered the greatest fiction writer of all time. That is quite an accomplishment, but I agree.
Quite, yes.
Yeah. I've never tire of her, never tire of Charles Dickens. But then living author, I never tire of Penelope Wilcock, the author of the Hawk and the Dove trilogy.
Yep, I have those in my bookcase. Yep.
Tell me some of your other favorites, because I could bore you with all mine. Tell me some of your favorite authors, children's or adult, whatever you want.
Definitely Elizabeth Gouge.
Me too. She's number one.
Yep, love Elizabeth Gouge. I really like P.G. Wodehouse.
Yes.
I thought I should just walk with my computer and show you my bookcases and show you the books that I have in them, but I won't. But I don't know. I'm looking across at my living room where my bookcases are, and well, of course, C.S. Lewis. I mean, Narnia changed my life and changed my world. So love Narnia, and there's just so many. I mean, nonfiction and fiction, and I wasn't ready for that. I did not write a list down.
No, you don't have to. Let me tell you something that will make you laugh. Well, you mentioned P.G. Wodehouse, who is our favorite in our family. So my grandsons were spending the night 2 nights ago, and they were getting ready to go to sleep. So they're, 8 and 10. So the twins are 10, and the youngest is 8. And the youngest said to me, Grammy, do you know Jeeves? And I said, of course I do. And he said, do you mind if we listen to Jeeves as we fall asleep? And I said, no, I don't mind at all.
And actually, so I found P.G. Wodehouse on my own. I was at the library when Jenny was a baby. Yeah. And I came across a title that said Jeeves, and I thought, oh, I've seen that name before. And so I picked up a P.G. Wodehouse book, not knowing at all, what
you were getting into?
Yes. And so I'm kind of proud of myself because I discovered him on my own. But
that is incredible. Yeah. So, something fun about him? I was listening to a biography on him years ago. And the biographer said that P.G. Wodehouse, although he was not himself a believer, was raised very much within the Church of England, and that you can hear the cadence of the King James Bible in every sentence that he ever wrote. And I thought, yes, it's true. And I'm such a fan of the King James Bible as the ultimate piece of literature of all time in the English language, the penultimate. And so he was influenced by that, and it shaped how he wrote, which makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Did you know we have a free book list to help you start building your home library? Carole listed out over 150 books that are on her bookshelves that have stood the test of time. Whether you are just starting to build your family's home library or you want to fill in gaps, this list is for you. Why spend time, money, and bookshelf space on mediocre books when there are so many wonderful ones in the world? Visit homeschoolmadesimple.net/book list to download the book list today. Happy reading.
Well, did you know, just a quick story about P.G. Wodehouse, that he was accused by the British government of being a Hitler sympathizer because he and his wife, you'll have to read the story. He and his wife had property on the coast of France, and when Hitler was advancing, he figured they'd be safe, and they weren't. And his troops came and they captured P.G. Wodehouse, and they put him in a camp. And so they figured out who he was, and they asked him if he would do some radio broadcasts. And so P.G. Wodehouse, being P.G. Wodehouse, he did these amusing broadcasts that were wired over to Britain. And so because he was in a Nazi camp and he was working for the Nazis, supposedly, he was basically blacklisted in England. And that's why he came to the United States after the Second World War.
Wow.
Because he did not want to go back to Britain because he was just so damaged by them thinking that he was not
pro-Hitler.
Yes. And so he was eventually, given a knighthood, and he did go back shortly before his death, but he spent all those intervening years mostly in Hollywood and New York City doing things. So
he was a genius. My grandchildren, and we have all these inside jokes as a family because of P.G. Wodehouse. So one day my grandson said something about Eulalie. And then they all just started hooting and hollering in my kitchen. And I thought, don't you love having shared fun from the books that you've read all together? It is so delightful. Oh my goodness, that man has just brightened the world with his humor.
Yep.
It's so funny. I love it. I love it. So if you were giving some advice to some homeschoolers starting out, you've been quite a pioneer in the homeschool movement. I think we both probably heard the same broadcast the same day with Dr. Moore, and then probably started attending his seminars. I was going to the seminars in California, and you were going to the ones in Minneapolis, right?
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So what would you tell these people? Dr. Moore isn't here anymore, and I feel that we need to carry on the message and the legacy that he gave to all of us as pioneers in the homeschool movement. What would you say to these families that are buying school in a box or open and go or coming under this school umbrella or that school umbrella and marching to everybody's drum? What would you say to them as an expert? Really, I'm saying it. I know you wouldn't say it, but I'm saying that about you.
I think the most important books to me were books children love and For the Children's Sake and Honey for a Child's Heart.
Yep.
And, so many books have come out since then. I mean, so many books. and but those three to me, they just lay it out. And if people haven't grown up in a book-rich family, we need to learn before we can teach our children. We need to understand what a good book is. We need to learn to love good books and to read good books ourselves. And so I just love those three books. And I don't even know if any of them are currently in print, currently available.
Honey for Child's Heart is. Books Children Love is not currently in print, but it's pretty easy to find. Those three books you mentioned and Susan's book is in print. I think I said that from Crossway. But the beautiful thing is that every time that I speak, Jan, those three books are on the handout that I give every time I speak. I mean, we are just kindred spirits because I completely agree with you. I remember buying my first Honey for Child's Heart when I was a young single girl. I was at a training for the school that I was teaching at, the Christian school, and they had that book in their bookshop. And I bought it, not knowing anything about it, but just because I had always been a lover of children's literature my whole life. And I bought that book, and it changed the course of my life. And then when Susan came to California to speak with Jane Stewart,
Elizabeth Wilson.
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth Wilson. Yeah, Susan came to California with Elizabeth Wilson, and they both spoke at Cal Poly, and we went up to hear them when our son was very, very young. And when that book was printed, I just clicked my heels. And I tell people, put Honey for Child's Heart and Books Children Love in your basket that you take to the library. And tell your children you can check out any books in any of these, in both of these books. And I say, give your children a highlighter, a color per child. One child is orange, another child is green, another child's blue, whatever. And then let them highlight the books in those two books during quiet time. And then when you go to the library, they have a whole wish list of all these fabulous books. So they're not walking around going, well, how about the Babysitter Club? Oh, please. Instead, there's this beautiful buffet that they have available to them. And it just changes everything for their lives.
Yep. So homeschool libraries for homeschoolers.
Circulating libraries.
Yes, because they have the older books.
Yes, they do. So I did a podcast with my friend Kathy, and she is in the Madison, Wisconsin area, and she explained how to find circulating libraries. Yes, we did a podcast. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yes, that's so important because, like I said, in our neck of the woods, the libraries don't even have so many of the books
I know
that we love.
Well, and Jan, I pray that you do open a circulating library, and then I'm going to take a field trip to Virginia Beach to come hang out at it because
You're
You know,
welcome.
what you're creating, you know what you're doing? I'm sure you've read Fahrenheit 451.
Years ago.
And the movie by Francois Truffaut, his first English-speaking movie. And in that book at the end, especially in the movie, I love the way they portray it. The young man has discovered books. He was a book burner for a living. He was like a fireman, but they burned books. And he started stealing books from firings where they would burn the books. And he started reading them at night when his ditzy wife was asleep. And he began to fall in love with books. And finally, he became an enemy of the state. And they were after him with speakers and robot dogs and all these things. And Julie Christie played his silly wife. But he gets on this train, and she has two parts in the movie. And the other part she played is the woman who challenged him to read some of the books he was burning. And she's on the train with him, and she says, if you ever are in trouble, just take the train to the very end of the line. And when you get there, keep walking until you find the train cars that are just up on the grass. And he does that as he's escaping the authorities. And he gets there, and it's cold. It's starting to snow. And a man comes up to him, holds out his hand, and says, I'm To Kill a Mockingbird. And the next man comes up and says, I'm Crime and Punishment. And the next one says, I am, I don't know, I can't remember all of the ones, Anna Karenina, whatever. And then Pride and Prejudice. And each person had memorized the book to save it for posterity. And then there's a man dying. He's an old man, and his grandson is there. And he, of course, it's all from memory because the books have all been burned. And then the grandfather is teaching on his deathbed, coaching his son the next line of the book that he was, to preserve it for posterity. That's what people like you have done for my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren. So thank you.
Well, it's been a joy, and it's been surprisingly what God called me to do. So
I know that. Jan, you're a gift. Would you pray a blessing over the homeschool young millennial families that are coming up in this movement? And would you pray for them?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Dear Lord, thank you for this time that I've had with Carole. Thank you for the impact she had on my life. And Lord, I pray that as we walk through our days, that the words we've said, the words we've spoken, the words we've written will reach the minds and the hearts of these younger moms. Lord, that they will learn the joy of reading, the joy of books, the joy of older books. And Lord, that they will be wise in choosing the newer books. And thank you for the authors that are writing. And we just lift up the authors who care about their children's books and who are writing good books. And just thank you, Lord, that words are important and that you are the God of words and you are the word. And just thank you so much that you love us and that you've given us opportunities to love each other. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Oh, Jan, I love you. And if you ever come to Oklahoma, you have a guest room at my house anytime.
It's been lovely. Thank you so much for your encouraging words. And thank you so much for being who you were at the very beginning.
If you're interested in getting Jan's books, check out her website at booksbloom.com. You've been listening to the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. If you like what you heard in this episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, or share this episode with a friend. It means so much when you help us spread the message of Homeschool Made Simple with others. Thanks for joining us this week on the Homeschool Made Simple podcast. Remember, Jesus' commandments are not burdensome. What he calls you to do, he will enable you to do. Blessings.